Okay, so believe it or not, I actually already filmed this video once, but I lost a ton of the lighting. So we're gonna go over some of the features of the new 2020 Riot 8000 that I picked up. I hope you guys enjoyed the pickup video. I did my best to make it as entertaining as possible. So first things first, the spec. Obviously I went with the green. By getting the green, that means you got the Fox QS3 shocks. As it did turn out, after enough interest by buyers, Arctic Cat did offer the QS3s on the gray, black, and blue sleds, but at first this was only offered on the green colorway. For a track, I went with a 1.35 inch Cobra. That's what I had on my 2017 Assault. I'll explain to you guys why I chose that. The rack comes standard. This bag came standard. I didn't realize that last year on the demo it actually was on there. It comes with the new Arctic Cat magnetic tether, which is really cool. Pops off super easily, goes back on. Much better than the one the RR had on it. The new switch gear as of 2019. This is the electric start button. It used to be the key on the 2018 sleds. It has the same gauge the RR had on it. If you had the Suzuki 800 on a Pro Cross sled, you wouldn't have had this gauge, but after a while it became standard on all sleds. It came with this magnetic goggle bag, so that'll be cool. I actually had a lot of trouble with my goggles fogging up last season, so that'll be a big plus to be able to throw them in there. It came standard with ice scratchers. I didn't expect that. They actually were on the demo sleds last year, but again, I just did a terrible job of paying attention when I got on the sled. I was pretty excited to just ride it. So those are the standard options. So the things that are updated for this year. First things first is the ARS2 front suspension. So this actually gives the sled 1.5 inches of additional ground clearance while also changing the roll center of the sled. So should still handle really good even though the sled's up a little higher. Definitely a plus, especially for the Riot, because when you're getting off trail, you're going to want to try to avoid all the brush and stuff. So this is a uncoupled 146. It's not tipped up at the back, so unlike my Assault, this is just a straight up flat rear suspension, and that goes into why I went with the 1.3. Putting the 1.6 on the Assault made it a lot tippier in my opinion. The side-to-side motion on the sled kind of, I found when it does start to slip, it really has a pretty aggressive catch point, and that was with both the Pro Steers and the CNAs, so I definitely don't think it's ski related. So the only thing it could be is the 1.6. The 1.3 inch Assaults, they're a little looser overall, but it does help with handling. So my thoughts are, if I'm not gonna have the tipped up rails, I definitely don't want the additional catch point of the 1.6 on this sled. It's still gonna have really good flotation. I mean, it's a 146, so it's not really gonna lack in that department at all. Maybe a little less lift, but this will still give this really good trail manners while still making it fun off trail. Plus, I think pretty much everybody that got a Riot got the 1.6, so this is kind of something different. I can give you guys opinions on what this track is like too. So from center to center, the Polaris Assault is 42.5 inches wide stock with my 2-inch offset. That can now be as low as 40.5 inches with my sled or 41.5 inches. The Riot's one of the reasons I wanted to get an adjustable spindle for the Assault, because this is adjustable from 42 inches wide to 43 inches wide. So it's nice to have the plus of being able to adjust your ski width, make it a little bit more fun off trail. Like I've said in the comments, and I don't know if I said it in the video, but I do plan early season to keep the sleds wide, and my Assault's kind of in the middle position right now, and then later in the season I'll narrow them both up, make them a little bit more fun when we're off trail. Or if, you know, my girlfriend's riding the Riot, I'll probably have it wide, stuff like that. It's really not too hard to adjust them. I have seen in the comments people saying, why would you want to have to mess with that all the time? As long as you have the right tool sitting in the trailer, you tip it up onto one ski, it takes like 5 minutes really. I mean, I guess with snow and cold it could be a little bit more difficult, and I'll know for sure once I actually do it in the winter, but especially as of right now it hasn't seemed too hard. So little differences I've noticed in each sled. Right off the bat, the Riot came with a lot of extra little amenities that the Assault might not have. Both do have a pretty large tunnel bag. For anyone that is just the Arctic Cat guy and has not looked at an Assault, this is the Assault's tunnel bag. Really solid size. You can see I got goggles in there. I have my buddy's swap out lens for his goggles. I can actually get my arm up to my elbow in there. This is where the rear shock would be on the Pro XC rear end sleds. So you have all that room for a tunnel bag, and it kind of fills it out perfectly. I find that it gives it a very similar profile of kind of like filling out the back. This is still a really solid bag. I've seen some other guys that got Riots say, you know, you can only fit like a belt in here. You can fit a belt, you can fit a hat, you can fit your paperwork. I think sometimes people are just a little too eager to put an extra bag on their sled. For the most part, this is pretty much all the storage I could think of needing. Obviously, some people do go on longer trips and stuff, and no question, people that are doing overnights on sleds will need a bigger bag than this. But for most people that are just riding for a day, you know, you get a hotel room, you already have your sled and your trailer, all your gear in there. That's pretty much everything that I would need, at least. This did come with the rear rack, which I think is cool. The Assault did not come with that. You could obviously add one if you wanted to, but from the factory it's not an option. It does have this cool mat, so if you do put anything on there, you won't scratch up your tunnel. The Riot did come with a mountain grab bar. I like this for a multitude of reasons. If you're doing something as simple as checking your carbides, it'll help tip it up when you're playing off trail and you do you know, biff it like yours truly does tend to do. It really helps you get extra leverage on the sled to help pick it up. So that's one of the biggest reasons I like it. Obviously, I don't do any sort of like side hilling because, you know, not huge mountains around here. But I think if you're really going to be playing in the powder, and, you know, especially when you're still learning and stuff, if you're maybe not super capable of flipping your sled up from the bars, that gives you a little extra leverage. It really does help you get the sled righted. The Polaris Assault comes with handguards, the Riot does not. I have really cold hands. My dad always makes fun of me for it, actually. So I would always want handguards. I know a lot of guys would make the argument that if you're playing off trail, it's just something extra to break off. But it's something that I like, especially for a 50-50 crossover, so to speak. These are their new G2 Pro Climb skis. These are 7 inches wide, which I think is awesome. They have a super deep keel on them, so that should be very interesting to live with. Obviously, I did demo ride one last year, and I got to experience what it was like last year, but I think on a day-to-day basis, different snow conditions and whatnot, that'll be really cool. Here are my stock grippers. These are 5.5 inches wide. So you're talking over 1.5 inch difference in ski width, which is going to be great off trail. I did upgrade to XCSs on my Assault. Those are 6 3/4 inches wide. So the G2s actually still beat even my upgrade to my Assault. So that's a plus in the book of the Arctic Cat. Shock wise, it's kind of hard to say. You know, Fox is obviously a bigger brand name. The QS3 I think is a little simpler. I do like that if I did want to adjust the sled and really soften it up to play off trail, it's literally just 3 options on every shock, you know, put everything to one. Whereas on my Assault, not only is it harder to know where to put it, but it's even harder to put it back. So I think it's just kind of personal preference. If you are the person who really likes to fine tune things, and especially if you're going to keep it one way more often than not, I would say the Assault's the way to go. You can really fine tune it. But I think for pure adjustability and just ease of use, I would personally take the QS3s in most situations. Stock, like I said, the Riot comes with the ice scratchers. The Assault does not. I've never really had too much of a problem with overheating on the Polaris Assault, even with the 850, even with the 800. It really has never happened. Riding sheer ice last year, I didn't have a problem. I just, you know, kept an eye on it, and if things did get too hot, I would just kind of take a second, and it really was never too much of an issue. I've heard a lot of people have had issues with Arctic Cats overheating. I personally haven't experienced it with my 600. This will be my first 800, so, you know, we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. Tether comes standard, which is cool. Doesn't come standard with pretty much any Polaris model, if I recall correctly. I don't even think the XCR comes with them, so just kind of a negative there. The keys are, like, honestly almost identical. Electric start standard on the Riot, not standard on the Polaris, so I can't really knock it for that. That was my choice to not get it, but I've said multiple times, like even with the Riot, having a pull start, if the battery dies, I won't be in a rush to replace it. And that's pretty much why I don't really bother getting electric start. It's not really something that I would say I super need. I do have a little footage from me starting this the other night. It does have electric start, but I want to try to pull start it and see how hard it is to pull start. Oh yeah. Ooh. Yeah, so a lot like the 600 was, that's not easy to pull over. I can easily pull over my Assault with one hand. say what you want, but that's pretty hard. It is a new engine, so I'm sure it'll loosen up over time. But that's kind of a characteristic of Arctic Cats that I've noticed. They're not really super easy to pull over. As you can see, I've never really had trouble pulling over a sled, pretty much one arm all the time, 1-2 pulls, no big deal. But the Arctic Cats are pretty hard to start, so I would say my recommendation, if it wasn't an automatic option on this, I would pretty much recommend it if you don't want to have to deal with a pretty difficult recoil. But it is a standard option, so you don't have to worry about that. And I would say on this sled, it does make a lot of sense to have. I would say the biggest difference is for the Assault, you have, in most cases, most guys are going to be getting the 850. Obviously an awesome, powerful engine, kind of, I would say, like the hot rod of engines. I would say the Skidoo 850 is kind of like a Mercedes V8, whereas this is kind of like a Chevy 6.2, like a LS3 or something like that. Just kind of chomps at the bit a little bit more, you know what I mean? It's a little bit more aggressive, whereas you could almost ride a Skidoo 850 and not know it's an 850. The power is 100% there. The delivery is just a little bit different. It's very like linear down low, and then it kind of takes off at the top, whereas the Skidoo is just linear all the way through. I don't know too much about this engine at all. It is updated for this season. Arctic Cat did make some changes from last year's. They're calling it a 165 horsepower class competitor. It's showing 163 horsepower, whereas I believe when they dynoed the 850, I want to say Bikeman was showing 171 or 172. Seems like their dyno was a little generous, let's say. But you know, number for number, that just kind of gives you an idea. The Arctic Cat is heavier. Just moving it around, like even putting them down here, you feel a lot more weight in the tunnel and in the rear end of the sled. Obviously that would kind of lend itself to thinking that the sled's going to be a little bit stronger, but I've never really had an issue with strength on my sled. The only thing I've seen over the years is that when people kind of come up short, they've destroyed these bumpers before, but that's pretty much it. As far as fit and finish goes, I didn't have too many complaints with my 850. The throttle has that kill switch system or whatever, that if it pins, it'll turn off. That always bothered me at first, but now that there's a reason behind it, it doesn't really bother me too much. Little like glue kind of popping out here, nothing too crazy. Overall, really solid fit and finish. And I gotta say the same with the Arctic Cat. It does have the updated panels this year, so even just the material of them feels more conducive to having the decals stick to it. It feels better overall. That'll help when I have to put the registration numbers on it, or when I put the registration stickers on my last Arctic Cat. They had pretty much peeled off within one ride, and it was just a pain overall to get them to stick. The panels do come on an awful lot easier, which was one of my biggest gripes with the last generation of the Pro Cross. You just got two really simple fasteners, one here and one on the back of the panel, just like that. And then bam, that comes right off. So it does still have the, in my opinion, stupid metal oil tank, but you can see it better. You don't have to peel back that one stupid panel to get to it, so that's an improvement in my book. This is obviously nothing new with the Riot or the 2020 Arctic Cat. This bodywork did make its first appearance on the Pro Cross in 2017, so it's nothing too new to the sled, but a plus in my book, because that was a huge pain on the last version of the Pro Cross, which is the fit and finish on things was not as good as I expected. It kind of, at surface level, at first you might think it's really good, like the sled looks great and it feels decent, but then as you kind of dig into it and you start to live with it on a day-to-day basis, things do kind of become a pain. I would say that the panels on the Arctic Cat do go on a little easier as well. I've always had a little trouble, even after I would say 3 full seasons with the Polaris, getting the side panels back on. I'm just not good at it, so kind of my own problem, but just something that you might want to keep in mind as far as like living with the sled goes. Prices, so the Arctic Cat, like I said, was $11,700 and change, I believe. The Polaris was $14,100, so pretty big difference in price. I just wanted to insert this clip real quick. I didn't really specify very well in the video, but I'm gonna give Polaris the plus as far as price goes because of the 4-year warranty. If the Arctic Cat came with even as much as a 2-year warranty, I think I would easily lean towards the Arctic Cat being the better value, but only having a 1-year warranty, it does kind of scare you a little bit with an updated engine, things like that. You don't really know resale wise where you'll be at. And I just think that there's definitely quite a bit of added value to the Polaris because of that. Obviously, it's to each their own. Some people are only going to be able to afford so much, but head to head, I really do think that the 4-year warranty brings a lot in comparison to only having a 1-year warranty on the Arctic Cat. So that's why I'm going to give the better value to the Polaris. Color-wise, you can obviously really customize the Polarises, which you guys know I'm all about. I think it's so cool that everybody can have a Polaris Assault and they can all look so different. Like, prime example, riding with Coda and then riding with the Full Send guys. None of us had similar looking sleds, and there were 4 Axis chassis Polaris Assaults there. So I think that's a huge plus. With the Riot, you do get 2 color options. Obviously, everybody can kind of customize them however they want. But I always think it's a plus in the Polaris category that it's so customizable. And it's kind of always been one of my downfalls with Skidoo, in my opinion. So in terms of front end travel, let's take a look. So to the bottom of there, we got about 10.5 inches. And now on the Arctic Cat, they're sitting on pretty much the same height of wood. The only real difference is the Arctic Cat has those really aggressive keels on the bottoms of the skis. About 10.5 inches on that as well. So pretty much the same as far as that goes. I'm gonna straighten them both out and then we can kind of get an overall profile of the sled side by side. So just give me 1 minute to do that. Okay, so I pretty much have them ski tip to ski tip. As you can see, the XCS has just come down a lot lower, just the style of ski that they are. So handlebar height, we're looking at pretty similar. I would say the Arctic Cat looks a little bit higher. The seat's also a little bit higher, but running boards are about the same. Overall length, you can see not too much different, to be totally honest. Snow flap to snow flap, bumper to bumper. Even the tracks aren't too much of a difference in length. So I would say as far as like fitting in trailers, they're going to be pretty much exactly the same. As far as ergonomics go, I would say somehow the handlebars feel a little too high when sitting on the Riot, but also feel a little too low when you're standing. So I'm assuming that has to do with like kind of just the overall height of the tunnel. Whereas on the Assault, everything kind of feels a little bit better. Your sitting ergonomics, the handlebars don't feel like they're too high, and then when you're standing, they do feel like they're at a really good height. The panels, though, on the Arctic Cat feel way better. You can really slide around the edges of them. You feel like you could like take a corner a lot better. The Assault obviously has all those really like rigid and kind of jagged edges on the panels, so those don't feel as good. The seat on the Assault's a lot harder, whereas the seat on the Riot feels pretty like squishy and comfortable. Although, in all honesty, when you're riding, I don't think you're gonna want the soft seat. When I did my review last year, it was a little too soft, especially in the outer edges here. You could really kind of feel yourself pushing through the seat, but hopefully with it being a newer sled and it hasn't been demoed a ton, sat on, gotten on and off of, all that, hopefully the seat won't be as worn out, and because of that, it'll maintain a little bit better rigidity. With your footholds, they're both really tight. The Arctic Cat, you can see you can't really get your foot too far in. It does have a really good hook for your toe underneath, but that's about as far in as your feet will get. The Polaris, your feet can go in farther, but it doesn't feel quite as conducive with hooking your toe underneath. And it is a little shorter, so even though both are small, I would almost say that the Polarises are a little bit smaller. As far as brake levers go, I did notice that the brake on the Arctic Cat did get a lot smaller. I don't know, without having really ridden it for a decent amount of time, how I'm going to feel about that. I did notice that the parking brake has 2 levels, so you kind of have like a sort of in, and you can go even farther than that. I do kind of like the idea of a bigger brake lever. You can kind of be farther out on the handlebars and get a hold of it. With this, you can really only snag it with your index finger, whereas on the Polaris, if you're way out, you can kind of get 2 on there, still do 1, and you're a little farther out overall. Throttle is a little longer on the Polaris too, but doesn't really bother me too much with either sled. Kill switches are almost the same. As far as the switch gear goes, definitely a nice adjustment, pretty much all the same functions overall. But one thing I do like about the Polaris a little bit more is that everything is colored. So just like when it's daytime out and you kind of like look down real quick, there's no question about what everything is. But that's just more of a when you're new to the sled and you're not really super familiar with the buttons. I'm sure with both sleds, after you've ridden them for a little while, it'll get pretty clear. I think a big plus is I like that these are stacked horizontally rather than vertically. Because vertically you'll go to like turn down this, and when you have a glove on, it's going to hang out over your thumb a little bit extra, and you end up turning down your thumb warmer. Or there's times where I want the thumb warmer off and I just want to run the hand warmer, and yet again I do the same exact thing. Whereas on this, gloves tend to be long, not wide. That was the point I was making, and I somehow got distracted. But I noticed for me that with them being longer, I tend to accidentally reach over and turn off the opposite switch. Whereas I feel like with them being horizontal, even though gloves are a little wide, it won't be as much of an issue. Whereas with these, they don't actually like kind of click into a set position, more like an on-off switch. Like these are like an on-off switch. These are just, you give them a tap and then it'll adjust kind of like the Skidoos were. So I think that's pretty cool. The buttons do also feel a lot better than they did on the RR. On the RR, they were very loose in the housing. These are nice and firm, so I'm a fan of that. The Arctic Cat comes with this 12-volt outlet, which is really cool. My dad uses it for his heated shield. You could use it to like charge your phone, things like that. I do kind of want to install something like that on the Polaris, but it doesn't come with it from the factory. So snow flaps, you can see the Arctic Cat's is a decent bit longer, which I think is a plus. When you get behind Assault, you do know it because it is kicking up dust all over the place. You have 12 idler wheels on the Assault, whereas on the Riot you have 7. So I don't know how that's going to affect slider wear. On my RR, I actually had really great slider wear, whereas on my 2017 Polaris Assault, they wore relatively fast. So we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out with a longer skid. The ice scratchers will obviously help with that, and like I said, those come standard, whereas on the Assault they don't. So as things turned out, it was 8 points for the Assault and 7 points for the Riot. I know a lot of those points were little features that came on the Riot, like the scratchers, the tether, things like that. My main point for giving it all those points was if you're thinking about getting a Riot, you're obviously going to be looking for value. There's a lot of value in a snowmobile that costs at max around $12,000 versus a sled that's going to cost you upwards of $14,000. Spec'd out, you're looking at around $15,000. So having all those extra features on top of that, if you get the Polaris, you're going to be adding all that stuff onto it. I would say you probably wouldn't need scratchers, but I think you should have a tether. The mountain grab bar you have to add. Like I said about the skis are something that you really should upgrade. There's all sorts of little stuff that needs to be added to the Polaris, whereas with the Arctic Cat, you don't have to do that. So you have a sled that already costs $2,000 less and is going to come with those little features that I think are pretty important. Some of them are going to make it definitely more off-trail friendly or just more crossover friendly in general. Plus, I think in general, just basing it off the chassis and the engine isn't really a whole lot of comparison. There's a lot of little features, and each person's going to enjoy each chassis a little bit more. I know my dad doesn't really love riding the Assault. I think it's perfect for me. He does prefer the ergos of the Arctic Cat, and he hates the ergos on Skidoos. So like I said, each person's different, and so you can't, in my opinion, just base it entirely off ergonomics and the engines. So for now, that's the comparison. This is more of just, if you're shopping, essentially what you're getting for your money, not exactly performance, but I hope this will kind of help people realize what's important to them and what they're going to get. Not everybody needs all the little features, and some people I know, the second their sled hits their garage, they're adding scratchers, tethers, all that stuff. So I hope this was helpful. I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you did enjoy it. I hope you were able to see all the features of the Riot, able to kind of see how they stack up against the Assault, and the stuff that is still on the Assault that I think is a big reason why for now it is one of my favorite all-time crossover sleds. Things like the tipped up rails, all that. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.